So I'm here with Mike Beeston, and we're going to talk about the potential for attention training in the work that Mike is currently doing in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So can you tell me a little bit about that work, Mike, and the kind of communities that you're currently working with?
Yeah, for sure. I am one of 5 people who work for an organisation called Ensemble de France. We set it up 2 years ago. It's a cooperative in Bukavu, which is in South Kivu in the east of Congo. And we support social businesses with finance and advice. That's what we do.
Okay, and you know that I'm working in the area of attention training. I was just wondering, do you see any opportunity for attention training in the kind of work that you're doing?
Yeah. I mean, I think we all need it, Paul. The characteristic in Congo, the country has never had an education system which really functions in a way that we would associate with. It's always been starved of resources. So people's kind of the tools that they use are very, very limited. So people are not always aware of what they don't have. So at the very beginning, it would be good for people to be more self-reflective, more self-aware, to become aware of each other, so that they can, in a sense, start, or at least ways to understand where to start. They've also been through colonial times when just about all of the decision-making roles were taken up by people, in this case from Belgium, which meant that the country, when it gained independence, was lacking any sort of real structure or know-how. So again, there's not been a kind of historic kind of contribution to the general knowledge of today. And then the NGOs have come in and they do a fantastic job, but they tend to work in a kind of not in a very directive. Maybe that's a bit unfair. Not necessarily in a way which works for everybody. It kind of works for kids if they've been through tragedy, or for people who are suffering from malnutrition, but not necessarily if you need to get out and maybe earn a living for your family, or start a company, or to do things which generally start moving things forward. At that point, the NGOs, in a sense, let go, but there's nothing to let go into. So the country is kind of really in need of support, and maybe a foundation for that support is awareness.
Okay, that's great. And do you think there's any particular angle that a purveyor of attention training might need to make, particularly if it was wanting to bring it to the DRC?
They would need to recognise that the start point is quite basic, and that people wouldn't quickly recognise the gap. They wouldn't quickly recognise the missing components that we perhaps in mindfulness or in meditation perhaps ourselves didn't recognise back in the day, but we've kind of come to recognise in ourselves. I think that might be that recognition might take time.
Okay, and do you think the kind of operational effectiveness, increasing focus and concentration in the workplaces that you've come across there would be something that might help the kind of things that you're doing and might help the people in those organisations?
Yeah, and for sure is the answer. So there is a kind of focus for an organisation, because people tend to struggle to commit to intellectual academic thinking or to operational thinking for a prolonged period of time, because they're not used to it, and the process they're not embedded with process, so they're not necessarily knowing how to go about doing things, and not necessarily knowing how to invent solutions for doing things. So by being self-reflective and by being open-minded, maybe it would contribute to their ability to getting the job done. But there is also a general thing. Mobile phones are now beginning in DRC.
Mm-hmm.
It's not used an awful lot. Well, it is actually, that's untrue. What are used are very, very cheap $15 replica phones. But as smartphones becoming more and more, we can see that attention is shifting to those smartphones, or or shifting to a computer screen, or shifting to this. There's almost a low level of awareness about that constant merry-go-round of devices or things that might grab attention, and just being able to step back and focus on the job is the challenge. And the behaviour that I see suggests that challenge is really, a solution is needed, but it is actually going to be quite a big challenge to solve.
Okay, and assuming that we could make some inroads, do you think longer term there might be any kind of social or even cultural benefits of people starting to practice attention training together in these workplaces?
People, although they've been through a really tough time, they're fundamentally good people trying to make what they can of life. And mindfulness, awareness training helps with that, whoever and wherever you are, right?
Yeah. Okay, so any other points you think that would be useful for us to know?
If you come to the east of Congo, which is the area where I work, then you realise that really, if there is a group of people who really, really need a helping hand, they live there. And I'm sure they also live in Burundi and Uganda and other places too. But for sure, where I know, it's in great need.
Okay, well, thanks for your time, Mike. It's been
Okay.
fantastic. Cheers.
Okay.